The voicemail came at 6:47 in the morning. My brother's voice, breathless and urgent. Mama's gone. The lawyer needs all of us at his office tomorrow at 2. Don't be late, Priya. No condolences. No grief. Just logistics and a warning. I sat on the edge of my bed in my studio apartment in Queens, the phone still warm against my ear. My mother, Lakshmi Rao, had died 3 days ago in Mumbai. I'd learned about it from a cousin's Facebook post, not from my brother Arjun or my father. The photo showed her funeral pyre surrounded by white-clad mourners. I wasn't in the picture because I hadn't been invited. I'm the daughter who left. In traditional South Indian families, that's not just a geographical statement. It's a betrayal. At 22, I'd chosen medical school in America over an arranged marriage to a cardiologist in Chennai. My mother stopped speaking to me the day I boarded the plane. That was 11 years ago. For over a decade, I was the daughter who sent money but wasn't welcomed home. I paid for my younger sister Meera's wedding, anonymously through my father. I covered my grandmother's surgery, routing the funds through Arjun. Every Diwali, every birthday, every hospital bill. The checks cleared, but my name was never spoken. My father, Venkat, is a retired civil engineer who built his identity on tradition and control. Arjun, the golden son, runs a real estate development firm in Mumbai, bankrolled by family money. Meera married into textile wealth and spends her days curating her life for relatives who measure success in gold jewelry and grandson count. I became an emergency room physician. I worked night shifts at Elmhurst Hospital, stitching together the broken pieces of other people's families while mine pretended I'd never existed. But I had one ally. My grandmother, Parvati Amma, who we called Amma. She was the matriarch, the original owner of the family's 3-story Haveli in Bandra and the small pharmaceutical supply company my grandfather had founded in 1968. When I was 16, Amma pulled me aside during a family gathering and said something I've never forgotten. Education is the only jewelry they cannot steal from your neck. She called me every week after I moved to New York. She was the only one who knew about my residency, my heartbreaks, my exhaustion. When she died 4 years ago, she left me a letter. It was written in Malayalam, our mother tongue, in her shaking handwriting. Priya, my lion girl. They will come for you when I am gone. Do not go to them soft. Go to them sharp. I didn't understand what she meant. Not then. The lawyer's office was in a converted colonial building in Fort, South Mumbai. I'd flown in on an emergency visa, sleeping in a budget hotel near the airport because I knew better than to ask for a room at the family home. I arrived at 1:55. The waiting room smelled of old paper and sandalwood. My father sat rigid in a leather chair, reading a newspaper he wasn't actually looking at. Arjun was on his phone, typing rapidly. Meera sat beside him, her designer sari perfectly draped, her face a mask of appropriate grief. No one acknowledged me when I walked in. At exactly 2 o'clock, the lawyer, Mr. Krishnan, called us into his office. He was a small man with wire-rimmed glasses and the careful neutrality of someone who would seen families destroy each other over furniture. He opened a thick folder and cleared his throat. This is the last will and testament of Parvati Devi Rao, executed 6 months before her passing and updated as recently as 2 years ago. My stomach dropped. Amma's will, not my mother's. Mr. Krishnan began reading. The Haveli, valued at approximately 12 crore rupees, was to be divided equally among her 3 grandchildren, Arjun, Meera, and Priya. My father's face went white. The pharmaceutical company, now worth 30 crore rupees annually in revenue, was also divided into thirds. But then came the clause that shattered the room. However, Mr. Krishnan continued, his voice steady, Parvati Devi has stipulated that her granddaughter Priya Rao shall serve as the sole executor of the estate and a managing trustee of the company for a period of no less than 5 years. During this time, all financial distributions require her written approval. The room exploded. This is absurd. Arjun slammed his hand on the desk. She hasn't been here in over a decade. She doesn't know anything about the business. She abandoned this family, my father said quietly, dangerously. She has no right. Mr. Krishnan held up a hand. There's more. He pulled out a second document. Parvati Devi was aware that her will might be contested. She has therefore included a provision. If any beneficiary challenges this will in court or attempts to remove Priya as executor, that beneficiary forfeits their entire inheritance. Those assets will be donated to the Tata Memorial Hospital's Cancer Research Wing. Silence. Meera was crying softly, not from grief but from rage. My father stood and walked to the window, his shoulders shaking. Arjun turned to me. His eyes were black with fury. You poisoned her against us. I haven't spoken to Amma in person in 4 years, I said. My voice sounded strange, too calm. I didn't know about any of this. Liar. He stood, towering over me. You played the victim, the abandoned daughter, and she fell for it. You manipulated a dying woman. Mr. Rao, the lawyer interrupted. I must remind you that I was present during the creation of this will. Parvati Devi was of sound mind. She made these decisions independently and with clear intent. My father turned from the window. What did she say? What was her intent? Mr. Krishnan hesitated, then opened a sealed envelope. She asked me to read this only if her decision was questioned. Tell me where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. I'd love to know who's part of our community. He read aloud in Hindi, then English. I leave my assets in Priya's hands because she is the only one who never asked me for anything. The only one who built a life without my money. The only one who knows the difference between love and inheritance. Arjun, Meera, you will receive what is yours, but you will learn patience. Priya will teach you, as I taught her, that family is not a bank account. The room felt airless. That night, alone in my hotel room, I opened my laptop. I'd been trained for triage, for making impossible decisions in impossible situations. I knew how to assess damage. I knew how to prioritize wounds. I started with the pharmaceutical company. I requested all financial records for the past 5 years. What I found made my hands shake. Arjun had been siphoning money. Not stealing exactly, but redirecting. Company funds had been rerouted to shell corporations he controlled, used as collateral for his real estate deals. He'd been using Amma's company as his personal line of credit, confident that no one was checking the books carefully. The total exposure, 42 lakh rupees. Nearly $6 million US. He'd gambled with a family business and lost. 3 of his development projects had stalled. The money was gone. I called a forensic accountant I'd worked with during a medical fraud case in New York. I sent her everything. Her report came back in 72 hours. Actionable, prosecutable, and devastating. I didn't sleep. I paced my hotel room, thinking about Amma's letter. Go to them sharp. The second family meeting happened 4 days later. I'd requested it, specifying the location. Amma's favorite restaurant, a quiet South Indian place in Matunga where she used to take me as a child. They came because they had to. Because I controlled the money now. We sat at a corner table. I'd ordered nothing. I placed a folder in the center of the table. I reviewed the company finances, I said. Arjun's face betrayed him. Just a flicker, a tightening around the mouth. There are discrepancies. Significant ones. My father leaned forward. What are you talking about? I opened the folder. Inside were printouts, highlighted transfers, dates, amounts. I slid them toward Arjun. You've been using the company as collateral for your projects. The money's gone. The projects failed. You've put everything Amma built at risk. That's not, Arjun started. I have the bank statements. I have the shell company registration documents. I have emails. My voice was surgical, precise. You committed fraud, Arjun. Against your own family. Meera gasped. My father's face had turned grey. You were desperate, I continued. You overextended on those developments in Pune. When they stalled, you needed cash fast. So you took it from the one place you thought no one was watching. You don't understand business, Arjun hissed. Those were investments. I was going to pay it back. With what money? Your projects are underwater. You're 3 months from bankruptcy. The truth sat on the table like a corpse. My father finally spoke. How much? 42 lakhs. Gone. Meera started crying again, real tears this time. My father closed his eyes. I leaned back in my chair. Here's what's going to happen. I'm restructuring the company. I'm hiring actual management, people with MBAs and ethics. Arjun, you're removed from all company operations immediately. You can't. I can. I'm the executor. Amma made sure I could. I pulled out a second document. But I'm not cruel. Here's your choice. You sign a personal guarantee to repay the 42 lakhs over 10 years, with interest. In exchange, I don't report the fraud to the authorities. You keep your inheritance, reduced by the amount you stole. You'll still get your share of the Haveli when I sell it, minus your debt. And if I don't sign, his voice was poison. Then I file a police report tomorrow. The company sues you for recovery. You lose everything, including your freedom. White-collar fraud carries a 7-year sentence in Maharashtra. I looked at Meera. You knew. The money he loaned you for your husband's textile expansion, that came from the company accounts. You're complicit. She sobbed openly now. You'll repay your portion. 5 lakhs over 5 years. Or you face the same consequences. I looked at my father. And you, Papa? You let this happen. You were on the board. You signed off on transfers without asking questions because it was easier than confronting your son. His face crumbled. I'm not punishing you, I said quietly. But I'm removing you from the board. You'll get your share when the estate is fully settled. Until then, you're out. I stood. You have 48 hours to decide. Sign the agreements or I go to the police. I'll be at my hotel. I walked out of the restaurant into the Mumbai heat. My hands were shaking, but my spine was steel. They signed. Arjun came to my hotel the next evening, the papers in his hand. He didn't look at me when he pushed them across the coffee table in the lobby. Meera's signature was already on hers, delivered by courier that morning. My father's came last, hand-delivered at 11:47 p.m., his eyes red but his signature steady. I didn't gloat. I didn't lecture. I just collected the documents and nodded. The following week, I returned to New York. But not to stay. I'd done something I'd been too afraid to do before. I'd applied for a position with Doctors Without Borders, emergency medicine, rural India. They'd been recruiting me for 2 years. I'd always said no because I was punishing myself, staying in New York as penance for leaving home. But Amma hadn't left me an inheritance to chain me to Mumbai. She'd left me an inheritance to set me free. The company was now managed by professionals. The profits would be distributed fairly. Arjun's debt would be repaid. The Haveli would be sold and divided. And I would finally do what I'd always wanted, practice medicine for people who needed it, not because it paid well, but because it mattered. 6 months later, I was in a field hospital in rural Karnataka, delivering a baby during a monsoon. The power was out. We worked by flashlight. The mother was 19, terrified, and alone. When the baby cried, healthy and loud, the mother wept. I held her hand, and I thought about Amma. Education is the only jewelry they cannot steal from your neck. But she taught me something else too. Power isn't about control. It's about choosing what to do when you finally have it. My family had tried to erase me. Amma had given me the pen to rewrite the story. I chose not to destroy them. I chose accountability instead. I chose freedom. And that, I realized, was the inheritance I'd been given all along. Not money, not property, but the clarity to know the difference between what I was owed and what I was worth. Some nights, in the quiet between emergencies, I think about that lawyer's office. About my father's face when he realized his daughter wasn't coming to beg. About Arjun's shock when he learned that the girl they'd ignored had grown into a woman who knew how to read a balance sheet and wield a consequence. I don't hate them. Hate requires energy I don't have to spare. But I'll never forget Amma's final gift. The knowledge that the people who underestimate you are simply giving you the advantage. Tell me where you're listening from. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories.